Good evening, sir.
Yo, this is episode 76 of the Beef and Bitcoin podcast with your host, Brett and CH. Today's topics. Looks like more countries are starting to legalize cryptocurrency and put their rubber stamp on it everywhere from France, South Korea, and then my favorite one, India, actually. Also, we finally had our emergency rate cut. Repo markets are pumping and oversubscribed. We'll touch on that. And then last but not least, Raoul Pal and did a couple podcasts this past event that people have been either looking for or anticipating, and is that the kind of pin that burst the bubble? So we'll touch on that there at the end. But how you doing this weekend, man?
Doing good. Again, we are in the very, very fun phase of number go up. And it's not Bitcoin this time. It is the number of confirmed coronavirus cases. And all I could say is this is, as you and I were talking about before we started recording, it's like we almost can't believe this is actually happening because we've been kind of like shooting the shit about it for at least 6 to 7 weeks now. Probably 7 weeks. And so now it's like, holy cow, this is actually playing out. And the actual coronavirus map just, it isn't pretty. Let's see if I can zoom it out. It's not looking too good. What do you say?
Looks like it's starting to get a little bit more red.
Yeah, it's getting a lot more red everywhere. And all I have to say is cases are just getting pretty ridiculous. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe we contain this, but I don't think this doesn't look pretty contained to me at all. I'm surprised the WHO hasn't said that yet. I mean, it's finding its way into every country now, in every continent. And, God knows how many cases are just undetected. People are like, oh, why is there no cases in Africa? Well, let me tell you, they have a pretty weak healthcare system. South America, weak healthcare system. Central America, weak healthcare system. Cuba, I wonder why.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting how this plays out.
Definitely. All right, well, let's jump in here to some of these countries starting to legalize cryptocurrency. It was multiple countries, it seems like, all in the same week or two, and I thought it was important to touch on because there's a few topics to kind of discuss, and different trade-offs between more regulatory clarity and then does that cause potential issues down the road. So we'll touch on that there at the end. But France has given Bitcoin the official status of money, and it's recognized as such. And Germany basically did something similar. South Korea also passed new legislation that provides a framework for the regulation and legalization of cryptocurrencies and crypto exchanges. So here the issue when you think about South Korea, that, okay, wow, it sounds bullish at first glance, but then it's like, all right, well, does this not help in the future? And I wanted to read this quote here. It says, financial service laws that would authorize Korea's financial regulators to effectively oversee the nascent industry and develop rules around anti-money laundering, among other processes. So whenever I hear KYC, AML, anti-money laundering stuff, my ears start to perk up because, as you and I have discussed, I don't know, it feels like hundreds of times now that while it sounds like it's helpful in theory, it's just more draconian type laws that end up being way more harmful than what they seem to, they're pitched as this thing to protect people. But in reality, you're having your personal information captured by these regulatory authorities who just have no business holding that information. And the more important thing is they can't protect that information from being leaked, stolen, or otherwise. So you end up really putting yourself in a bind if you're holding heavy Bitcoin bags and, a regulator or whoever loses that information, and then you get a $5 wrench attack at your house. Whose fault is that, right? If they wouldn't have collected that data in the first place, you wouldn't have been a target.
Yeah, I was going to say the KYC AML, again, it's funny, early on, obviously, in crypto, there was very little of it, and even into 2017, there were a lot of exchanges that didn't implement it, but it seemed in the summer of 2017, and obviously into the fall, almost all exchanges went, full KYC, AML, etc. I mean, I saw something, maybe it was just a rumor on Twitter, like even BitMEX is probably going to do KYC, AML now, which means, just means like, obviously, Americans who trade on that are pretty screwed, but it's just interesting to see that. But there's apparently I saw someone shilling. He just shilled all his ref links to every other margin trading, crypto site. So typical.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, typical.
Ref links. Oh man.
Yeah, the other, so those were those three I kind of wanted to talk to, and then the last one, which to me it seems actually fairly bullish, is India's Supreme Court has overturned that central bank's 2-year-old ban on cryptocurrency trading. So basically in 2018, it had barred banks and other financial service providers from facilitating any service or relation to virtual currencies. So basically no on or off ramps for the country. And, we're talking about a country with a population of 1.4 billion people. Now, I don't know how many of those 1.4 billion are actually interested or willing and able to start buying Bitcoin or something like that, but that's still a shitload of people considering there's only, 340 million people in the United States, and how many of them are actually interested. It's a bigger pie to go around. So I think that was it's good to say the least. They're starting to come around to it. But there was another statement in this article that I wanted to talk on to kind of touch upon the point about why more regulation and legislation and legalization is not a good thing. So originally in 2018, the Royal Bank of India, I guess it is, the RBI, had argued that Bitcoin cannot be treated as a currency as they are not made of metal or exist in physical form, nor were they stamped by the government. So, that's 100% correct. And that's exactly how it should be viewed. And to Beautyon's point, and he always stresses this and pushes back whenever people are talking about Bitcoin being money, blah, blah, blah. He always says Bitcoin is not money for that very specific reason, because it leads to more problems, mostly legal and regulatory. So when you're thinking about how bullish it might seem to get regulatory clarity on all these things, at the end of the day, Bitcoin's just software. It's just ones and zeros. It's just text. It's speech. It's protected by the First Amendment. You don't want to get yourself, like people like Coin Center, you think they're doing a good job trying to push for these de minimis tax laws and stuff like that. And all you're doing is really setting precedent for Bitcoin being put into this regulatory box that you might not want it to be in another decade or so. But, this is where I kind of wanted to get your take on it, because I'm thinking about it in two different ways. On one hand, more regulatory frameworks and legislation, it just makes it more costly to do business. You're going to have less competition. You're going to have the bit licenses of the world, thanks to, I can't remember that guy's name in New York who created the bit license. And then it ultimately stifles innovation, right? So instead of having a bunch of BitMEXs running around with no KYC offering, unbelievable services for Bitcoin trading, you're just going to have a lot of, regulatory nonsense. But then on the other hand, you can look at India as an example, allowing 1.4 billion people to start getting their hands on Bitcoin, to me, is beneficial. And, you say this all the time, like once the cat's out of the bag, it's kind of out of the bag. You can put all the regulations and laws and stuff into that. There's a lot of laws for a lot of things, and it doesn't stop anything. So if anything, maybe regulations just slow things down, but it can't really stop it. But I wanted to get your take on that.
The whole cat's out of the bag, I was going to say that's definitely, you can relate that to the coronavirus, the cat's out of the bag at this point, and cat's out of China. But getting back to this, the KYC AML, it's kind of a shit cannery, because you and I have talked about it, mentioned on podcast before. The biggest money launderers are banks. Like HSBC is a perfect example. They were laundering hundreds of millions for the cartels. And like literally they had a specific like suitcase that they would put through these teller windows, like just drive through, and then they would just, put those cases away. Dude, it was ridiculous. Laundering, but like again, they're worried about people laundering money on crypto, or laundering on crypto, which yeah, but there's not like think about the volume that real banks do and what is even going on crypto. Most of it's just a bunch of people buying shitcoins, other people holding Bitcoin, and then people speculating. That's about it. People being leveraged degens. I mean, that sums it up. There's people who buy it to hold Bitcoin because they fundamental. There's people who are on there just slinging Bitcoin for leverage because there's all these trading nonsense. And then there's, people who are speculating, and it's just that's what makes up crypto. And then I was going to say also, it's Reserve Bank of India's RBI. I would have totally said Royal Bank.
Reserve Bank.
Yeah, I would have totally said Royal Bank too, but it was staring at me in the face in bold. So.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
And I was like, I got it. Because there's people listening, so that way, But, yeah, no, KYC AML is kind of a joke because there's just every bank you could look at, including Americans, banks, like, you name it, they've been in trouble for money laundering at some point, one or another. It's ridiculous, but, that's the end of my rant on that.
No, yeah. It's one of those things. I think it takes time. Like, you and I are in the minority. If you were to ask every person if they thought anti-money laundering laws were a good thing, 9 out of 10 people would say, yeah, of course, why not? Are you saying you want drug dealers to be able to blah, blah, blah and get their money? Don't you care about the children and the whatever? They just instantly go to this hyper emotional reaction. Whereas if you take a step back, you could be like, well, how many fucking times have you had your identity stolen, your credit card compromised? Imagine if it were your debit card and your checking account gets drained and all this stuff. I mean, really, at the end of the day, requiring someone's ID for anything is pointless and doesn't really benefit anyone, and it most certainly doesn't protect anyone. If anything, it exposes you to more harm and violence. So, yeah, I guess that's the end of my rant too. But let's jump into the rate cuts in the repo markets. So, last week we saw the emergency rate cut. That was the first one since 2008, and the last one prior to that was in 2001 during the dot-com crash. And you and I had discussed in September of last year that there was that first surge in the repo markets when it went over 10%, and J.P. Morgan had apparently been pulling liquidity out in 2019, and eventually that makes its way back in for all of the highly levered financial institutions like hedge funds who needed that liquidity, and all of a sudden that starts drying up and they start running into issues. Then fast forward a couple months and now we're in March, and there were overnight repo operations of about 100 billion or more each day, and they were all oversubscribed, meaning a lot more people needed that liquidity than ended up actually getting it. So there's a liquidity crunch. There's not enough dollars in the system. Raoul Pal's been banging on this drum for like 6 months now also. So we sit and we look at this, and we've seen the manipulation of interest rates. We've seen ultra high leverage spread throughout the financial system. Credit expansion is causing the system to be super fragile. It just really proves the point of why sound money is so important. And regardless of what the sound money standard is, to limit the expansion of these kind of catastrophic like events, and when they do happen, to just let the free market bankrupt whoever and they move on and you just do your thing.
Yeah, I think you and I, at least I have realized at this point how, considering it doesn't matter how much fiscal or whatever stimulus that central banks throw right now, we're getting into, and I keep seeing it, it's a supply and demand shock. People aren't going to be going out. People aren't doing shit is what's going to start happening in places when these numbers go up here. And so people can't build shit. People can't go to work in the factories, etc. And then people are out. Dude, think about commercial airliners are fucked. Cruise ships, fucked.
Right.
Like, this is where the situation has led us now. Markets are just have to be milked every day with money. And now it doesn't matter because they've met something that it literally doesn't matter. You can throw as much money at you as you want this problem, but if you actually aren't trying to mitigate it, there's going to be issues. So,
right. It's rate cuts can't solve everything, and it's like if you look at everything like a nail and you're a hammer, you're just going to hammer the shit out of it, and that's what that's what we've seen just from central banks across the planet have been cutting and cutting and cutting, and you know more about this than I do with Japanese stagflation, and just they've been cutting rates forever, and their stock market's gotten crushed for like 2 decades. It hasn't really helped all that much. Cutting interest rates do not, under any circumstance, just all of a sudden lead to prosperity. And I find it really interesting because Raoul had talked about this on his video, or a podcast interview or whatever, how, they have to be somewhat responsible. And I think that's when I start to notice people who don't have a good understanding of just Austrian economics or read anything to that effect, because he's still convinced, oh, well, the responsible thing to do is cut, whereas the Austrian argument would be, no, what you should do is do nothing. Stop, take that whole system of manipulating interest rates out of your control and let the market flush the system out, get it done as quickly as possible, and just get it over with. And we saw that when in the Great Depression, where the New Deal is taught to us in school as this thing that ended the Great Depression, all this stuff, but in reality, it just prolonged the Great Depression for just years and years and years from all this nonsense, malinvestment and misallocation of capital.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, here's a sad chart. I don't know if you're able to see it.
Yep.
It's hopefully it actually pops up full, and now it won't, of course. But it was, if you were watching on YouTube, it's a chart of the Japanese 10-year yield, and it going all the way back. And in 1990, it was, let's see, 8%, 8.2.6. That was like the peak of their stock market bubble. If you're watching again on YouTube, you can see again the Nikkei 225 hit like 39,500, so 39,500 points. It is currently now at 20,000 points, 20,700. So it has not even came close to the all-time high, and I'm afraid that's what we're facing in America, and people don't understand how drastic the consequences could be, at least in the near term. Like, I feel like that's, and it's scary to see that the Japanese have went from, all the way down to negative 0.13%. So you lose money. That's your rate. You lose money per year on a Japanese 10-year bond. You give them $10,000 and you get like what? I don't know how much you get back. You probably get what, $9,000 back. You're paying. Yeah, you're paying for the loan.
Yeah, you're basically paying. You're paying
makes no sense.
for the bank to hold your money. Which,
it makes
if you're
zero
thinking
sense.
about, yeah, it doesn't make sense from the way that we think of traditional banks, right? I can understand if you're a warehousing business and you're trying to store your gold or your physical cash put in a box or something with armed security around it. Yeah, I'd expect to pay a fee for that. But this is something different. This is where you have to pay to have your money loaned out to someone who's basically being paid to take on the loan. I mean, the whole thing is just complete nonsense.
Yeah, this is gonna get interesting, man. Like, looking back at some of these quarterly sticks, falling 22% in a quarter, 34.
Yeah, I mean that's wild.
Yeah, and we're down 12 in the Nikkei. That's the Nikkei 225. And someone was mentioning, like, someone said the other day, someone's like, no one is paying attention to the barometer of, like, the world economy health, the S&P 500 or something the other day. I was like, holy shit. Like, somebody was saying, like, or most of the traders don't know that this is, like, the world barometer. Because, like, you just, like, right now, like, everything, shit is just hitting the fan. Like, oil's falling, gold prices, Bitcoin, you name it, everything's just moving. There's nothing static right now.
You have a lot of people who are in the workforce, millennials, who basically started in 2009, so they've never seen a recession. They've never seen like a down day in the market, pretty much. Like, they've only known up days and prices and number go up. Like, they don't know any better than that. So I think everyone could be in for an interesting surprise, even for a lot of the boomers and whoever like that who forgot about past recessions. They just totally. They don't even remember 2001 anymore, like it never happened, or 2008. But let's jump into the coronavirus Black Swan event. And obviously, I know this is your favorite topic, but
I can't get it. Did you want to mention the reason is the oil part of this?
Yeah, the oil part of it. I wanted to get to that at the end. Yeah, so. The reason I put this on I know we've been talking about coronavirus for the last couple of weeks here, but I wanted to put this one on as a topic because Raoul Pal did an interview with Pomp this past week, and it was really good. Listen to it. It was almost like 2 hours long. And then he had his video that dropped on Real Vision, just about his whole outlook on coronavirus and Black Swan events. I think that came out 2 days ago now. So I watched that, and it was really good. And he was doing his best, trying not to be super doom and gloom about it. But he makes an argument that, not only could this be recessionary, but even depression like, if it were to be more of like a worst case scenario type thing. And I think that's when, and of course he said, I'm not trying to scare anybody, and you almost don't even want to believe it, but this is when I think he's trying to take it more seriously, trying to wave the flag, or at least sound the alarm for people who want to take it a little bit more seriously. And you and I have been talking about this stuff for way over a year now, and whether it's the pension crisis, inflation that we're about to see coming in, companies with just crazy valuations, Robinhood trading, all kinds of stuff that really make it seems like this is the end of a credit cycle, just because it feels so euphoric in weird ways, with people just not caring, and markets pulling back 15%, and all of a sudden we need to cut interest rates because we're pulling back from all-time highs. Just a lot of complete nonsense. What do you think about that?
It's absolutely insane what's going on. We felt like it's the end of the world because the stock market's dropped off all-time highs. And it's a scary thought. People haven't seen for a decade the stock market not being relatively within all-time highs for more than a day or two. When you think about all the rebounds we've had for the last decade, when you look at the chart, the rebounds are insane. And, there's never a period where we're not approaching new all-time highs. Just like in 2017, dude, it was like Trump's victory lap, dude. When you look at that chart in 2017, man, I'm sorry, I gotta go to this S&P chart, man. It always makes me laugh because it's, dude, after that election,
it just took off.
Well, yeah, just fucking engulfing sick, and it just marched. Think about it. It marched for a year, dude. Every day was victory for Trump, dude. Think about it,
exactly.
Dude. That's the best ego boost ever, dude. Because it's just dude, it's fucking marched for a year, dude. Look at that. No pullbacks, no nothing. Just fucking straight to the top, man. Sorry, I had to say that. It's just funny. It's his barometer of his presidency. No, this is the real deal. And you and I have been kind of, as I said, 7 weeks now talking about it. It's March 7th when we're recording this. It's getting real. The U.S., let's see, I don't know exactly how many cases we have now. 410. Yesterday it was 234 in the afternoon. We're talking about a 27-hour gap or whatever. It wasn't long ago. Obviously we're actually testing now, so it's just blowing up everywhere. But it's not good. It's not good, and people don't understand. The numbers are going up, and I think you and I can both agree the Chinese numbers are complete bullshit. They locked down Wuhan, completely quarantined it, when there was 2,000 cases officially total, in the whole country. They quarantined a city of 11 million people. That'd be like us quarantining New York. I would be surprised if we quarantined New York when there's 2,000 official cases. I think we're very close to it in the U.S. End of the month tops, man. We got 23 days left. Is it 31 days in March or 30?
I forget, to be quite honest with you.
There's 31. But, March, yeah. So, 24
I think you make
days.
a good point. And this is where I wanted to jump into that oil and gas tweet that we were looking at, because there is an economic impact to a lot of this stuff, whether it's, even though I don't think the coronavirus is nothing, even if it's over tomorrow and it's said and done with, you still have an entire country being shut down for a couple of weeks who produces the majority of the goods and products that the rest of the world uses. And it takes a couple of weeks or a couple of months for that kind of economic information to flow back into the economy. And it can lead to some disastrous kind of things. And I was reading about this Texas oil and gas producer who basically took to Twitter and was like, I don't blame the coronavirus. I don't blame OPEC. I don't blame, Russia hoax, or I don't blame anything else. But basically the fiscal irresponsibility of the U.S. shale oil industry for being over leveraged and oversupply the market. And Raul Paul had talked about this in his coronavirus video, basically saying oil producers have no choice but to keep ramping up the supply of oil, even though the price is dropping, because they need to sell as much oil as they can just to cover their expenses or to cover their, interest and debt service agreement. So you have prices of oil taking a shit, and typically you'd want to, if you tried to restrict the supply to pump up the price back up a little bit, you can't, because you literally need to sell that oil in order to cover your expenses. And, he said, Mike Shellman on Twitter basically said, I can't imagine how much worse it could get. 4 or 5 months of oil below $40, and half of these guys, meaning workers, will go down hard. And like the oil companies, investor sentiment is gone now forever. And worse, the service industry will not survive this. So when and if the prices recover, there'll be nobody to do the work. So you have a lot of different industries just inside that oil and gas industry who provide service and maintenance to the plants, or electricians that work specifically in these areas. All of a sudden, all those people aren't going to have jobs if oil stays below a certain price for a long enough period of time. Like that whole market starts to die off.
Yeah. You know, there's one solution to this, and I hate to say it.
I have a feeling I know what you're going to say.
War.
Yeah.
look at this chart down. If you're looking at the chart on YouTube, look at July 2nd, 1990. What happens then? This is the beginning of the Iraq War in the Gulf War, the original Gulf War in 1990, and the price of oil went from looks like 15 a barrel to 40 a barrel in 3 months, and then it pre-collapsed. But if you can make a long enough war, there's going to be a high demand for oil, you bet. So I don't know, but I mean, the price of oil is just plummeting right now. But think about what happened when that Saudi, it was at the Aramco place, just got hit by those Iranian drones or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, the price of oil, shot up like it was an insane amount.
Yeah, I forget the exact time frame of when that was, but I think we had talked about it in one of the episodes. Yeah,
it went up 12% overnight. It was over the weekend. Like, it happened over the weekend, of course, and then it just gapped up like 12%. It was the most ridiculous thing ever.
Yeah, I think this is so interesting to think about when you think about how interconnected we are as a global economy now, and how reliant certain countries are on certain things. And, it's good to know that there's a lot of oil production in Texas and in the United States, so that's a good thing. But it's crazy, the dynamics of how the financial system, stock markets, the prices of commodities come into play when things can get really bad. And, I know you and I have talked about this, and I was discussing it with one of my buddies who said, even typical retail sales or people going out to eat and restaurants and stuff like that, if you imagine a town being, let's say they're just spooked by coronavirus and they're like, you know what, maybe I'm just not going to go out to eat for a little while. I'm going to limit my trips to the grocery store and this and that, and you start to cut back on that stuff, your local businesses really feel it, and very, very quickly. And then all of a sudden, I can look back and I can imagine telling a story in a couple of years like, oh yeah, I remember the coronavirus happened, and people panicked, and like all these businesses shut down because nobody ended up going out anymore. It's almost too perfect. So I don't know. What do you give me your take?
I 100% agree there, David. Who's gonna if this gets really bad, which it looks like it is, I'm going to go back to the coronavirus chart here. When you look at this is the confirmed cases, China numbers, we can assume they're all fake. I can tell you that for a fact because, you don't shut down an 11 million person city for 2,000 cases. Like, it obviously was much higher. The spread was terrible. Hospitals were getting overrun. And so they had 18 crematoriums that were running full bore for I don't know how long, a month or whatever, a few weeks they were running, and 3 of them blew out apparently, and they shipped 40 mobile incinerators for medical waste, I've mentioned this before, to Wuhan. That's not for medical waste. Sure, there probably is medical waste, but there's something else, and I hate to say it, bodies, because there's obviously a big human toll to this. We don't know what's going on in Iran. Iran's been exporting a lot of cases. Italy has been a huge exporter of cases. I'm surprised. Everyone should cut off Italy because Italy is exporting cases everywhere. Even the U.S. is beginning to export cases. So that tells you there's community outbreak, and that means it's been spreading for a while. I'm not an epidemiologist, but I'm reading what a lot of smart people are posting, and I've been following this for 7 weeks now. And I'm just watching it unfold, unfortunately, in front of my eyes. And this chart, looking at this fucking map is really concerning to me. Because, as you said, it's the panic factor. If people stop going out, who's going to, I know in the U.S., in a few weeks, people probably don't go out. And when people start wearing masks all the time, things are going to be different here. People aren't going to go out and eat. Why would you want to take a chance? Who's preparing your food and back? Who's possibly sick? The waiter, the server, etc. You're only one person away in that restaurant from someone being sick. I I think you saw the tweet from Paranoid Bull today. He's like, in a week, you'll know someone that has it, and something like that, or 2 weeks, And I think he's right. Like, it's not long before this, as you say, number go up. You'll hear something about it.
No, yeah, I think it makes total sense. And this is where I like to try to isolate this like consumer-driven panic, regardless of the severity of what coronavirus can possibly do, right? Outside of how bad it can be, because we've seen like media making people go hysterical and panic about a ton of things over history. So you can see that they can cause a panic very quickly.
Oh, yeah.
But it really does have that ripple effect, and it just blows my mind when you think about how interconnected everything. I know I just said this, but it only takes even a day or a couple days worth of restriction in economic activity to really play out. And even when you think about price to sales ratios and earnings ratios of some of these companies, I've been waiting for, new Apple products to come out. I'm in the market for some stuff. And you think, wait a second, if they're supposed to release a new product in March or April and China's been offline for a couple of weeks now, what does that do to demand? They've already factored this into their earnings that they're, estimating all this shit. Sales, all of a sudden they're not going to have that new product to sell. And now apply that to hundreds and hundreds of companies who were living and providing guidance on the expectation that they were going to deliver new products and services over the next couple of quarters. And now all of a sudden that gets pushed back a couple of quarters. It really just starts to play out in a way that I think you and I have kind of had our finger on the pulse for this. So it looks more obvious, but once you start hearing about it on CNBC or Jim Cramer talking about the supply chain issues of coronavirus and stuff like that, then I know it's probably we're smack dab in the middle of it or close to the end. But people need to be aware of it before that happens, not after.
Yeah, and we're already seeing airlines, I think it was United Airlines, literally cut flights by 20% domestically, 40% internationally. And I'm sure they'll reduce it more as this gets worse. Because that's where we're heading. But anyways, and they were also I'm assuming every airline at this point is freezing hiring. That's what it looks like. United Airlines said they were doing freezing hiring, and you're gonna see with every company, because if people stop going out and work, people stop going to work, people stop having money, people stop spending money because people are afraid to go out. It's just a giant cycle. It snowballs and it gets worse and worse. It just spinning faster and faster when less people are going out, so less people are making money, less people are working, whether you're talking service or going into work, etc. And then obviously the supply chain issue is a huge another. People are not realizing that prescription pills might not be existing in a few months in the U.S. or even sooner. You might not be able to get your prescriptions. So
yeah, it's people really don't think about those kind of I don't want to use the term black swan, but you wouldn't expect to not be able to get a prescription, right? It's never crossed your mind that you couldn't walk to CVS or Target or wherever you get your prescriptions and get what you need. It's never crossed anybody's mind that might not be available to you at the snap of a finger. And then all of a sudden people are starting to learn that with the crazy videos of people buying all the toilet paper or all the cases of water or all the paper towels, and people are like, man, dude, let me get some of that toilet paper. And you're like, I can't believe there would ever be a time when I couldn't buy toilet paper. And I went to Costco this morning, and I was there before they opened just so I could kind of get in and out of there. And I texted my buddy whose parents escaped basically Soviet Russia. And I'm like, dude, is this how your parents felt? Waiting in line real quick to sprint into the grocery store to grab whatever you could really quickly because you didn't want to run out of, me being I was afraid I'm going to run out of prime caps, so obviously I need to stock up on prime caps and other delicious meats. But it was just I thought it was kind of funny, but then sad at the same time because people have in their lifetime had to wait for bread, food, water. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, no, people don't think like that. People we live in a bubble in America. I mean,
Right.
You have to go back to 9/11 the last time there was something pretty drastic that happened. But again, that was in one city. I guess you include Shanksville and the Pentagon. But really, okay, so that was the last time there was really, there hasn't been anything super serious. Yeah, sure, we've had some mass shootings, we've had some bombings, but nothing at a grand scale like this. And this could get, again, really bad. Things are gonna we aren't ready for it. People aren't ready for just shit to literally utterly hit the fan. And I hate to put it that way. And I meant to talk about it earlier. Like we're about to watch the other locations, which is the yellow line on this chart. It's going parabolic. It's in the process. You and I have seen this before. We know mitigation has failed at this point. You know.
Right.
I mean, I love. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, being in the Bay Area, I've already seen a bunch of San Francisco companies are going full-time work from home. For any employee that is willing and able to work from home, they do not want you coming into the office. I think you really nailed it there. As testing actually starts to ramp up in the States and in other countries, you kind of need that news to flow back into the consciousness of everyone else. And then you're starting to have more and more companies start heading in that direction. More people working from home. Please don't come into the office if you're sick. All this stuff. They're just going to start heading in that direction, but they haven't had any incentive to, because they don't know anybody personally who's been impacted by the coronavirus. They don't have a friend of a friend who's been impacted by coronavirus. They've, seen one thing on the news. China, that's interesting. And it's gone totally out of their minds. So it does take time for this stuff to flow through. And even me, I've been working from home for the last week. That's all the time I haven't spent taking the train. No, that's another person who's not going out to lunch. Dude, all those things, it adds up.
I try to explain to people, it's like having unprotected sex with everyone. That's what explain it. Like, if you want to explain it in a very blunt, that's literally what it is, except with everyone. Because this is how this is becoming. And the numbers, I know the numbers look pretty. They're not that pretty right now. Like U.S. 417, Japan 461. These are confirmed infected. Spain 500. Others is 696. I don't know what that means. That might be cruise ships. Germany 799. France 949. Iran 5,823. Italy 5,883, and then South Korea 7,041, and then mainland China is just flat. I don't believe it. 80,652. Maybe they might have mitigated it because 10 million people got it now, but still, I don't know. They a lot more people than 80K got it in China. Okay, that's all I know. Everyone knows that the numbers are baloney. That's all I have. And then all these other countries. I mean, there's so many now that have dozens, and it's like case cluster. And then just local outbreak, like Seattle,
right.
Pacific Northwest.
Seattle's like Wuhan 2.0 over here.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who was supposed to travel to Seattle, and luckily their trip got canceled. But I think somebody showed a traffic map of Seattle, and it was pretty green, right? There's not too many people driving around, which
Dude,
makes
county
total sense.
Listen to this: King County, Washington, U.S. 71 confirmed, 15 dead. 1 recovered, 55 active. That is not a good ratio. Oh, shit.
Yeah.
I don't care what people are saying. We have zero clue what this is. And I know most of them, I think, were old people in a home. But still, we have zero clue. And the Italian report about it mutating person to person, that's not comforting news. We have zero clue. And it's these numbers are not good.
Yeah. And this is where, again, it's almost like you're gonna see this playing out just as the weeks go by. There's nothing else you can do at this point except, even if you wanted to take a little extra step of being paranoid, $100 at the grocery store for Lysol antibacterial cream and some canned goods isn't gonna either break the bank, and it's certainly not gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
And you and I were talking about, Nassim Taleb's been talking about it, and I think his kind of point was not to panic everybody, but he did say panicking has protected so many people for thousands of years. A little panic actually never really hurt anybody if you prepare diligently, but not taking something seriously can end up being catastrophic. So, again, you don't want to be the person to spread panic because that can make things dangerous, but it also doesn't hurt to just do those basic things, right? And even if you don't need the extra water that you bought or the canned goods or whatever, at least you went and got them. Your anxiety's down because you don't have to worry about it. You don't mind staying home for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. It just makes you feel better overall.
It's when you look, if you can watch right now, I have FlightAware.com open. And they have a live radar map, so you can see all the aircraft flying around the world. and I have it zoomed out pretty far. And Crypto Huber, would you like to tell them what you see?
I see a lot more flights than I thought I would see, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, there is a lot of commercial airlines and other aircraft in the air. That is a majority of them are commercial airlines, obviously. Literally, there is no way we're going to stop this spread from just becoming absolutely insane. And like, we've never been so connected as a globe any time in history when there's been outbreaks. Even when you think about the 1918 Spanish flu, that was different because we weren't flying people all over the world. I don't know how many people travel each day, but it's got to be over 100,000 easily still. You would imagine, right? It's not out of the crazy.
In 1918?
No, now. Like, now there's got to be easily 100,000 plus people are on flights every day. You got to imagine. Looking at this
possibly per airport. You have no clue. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. But looking at this map, and that's a lot of planes. And, yeah, I mean, there could be like 600 flights over the U.S. right now and Canada. It's a lot. And a lot of these are international. You can look over the water and you see all these international flight paths and you're like, holy cow. You realize that like there's zero chance to stop spreading. It's only going to get worse because you think about, you're in a town of 800 people and it takes that one dude who left and went somewhere, a week ago, caught it somewhere else, brings it back to your town, spreads it to a couple people, and then all of a sudden you have like 15 cases in a town of 1,000 people, and that 15 has already become 60 by the time they figure out what it is, and then it's like 120, and then it's like, half the town got infected. How did that, like our healthcare system isn't ready. Like people aren't wearing masks, people don't care. And it's not going to matter until, like, I don't know. They're going to probably, as I said, they probably have to quarantine Seattle for people to be like, this is kind of a big deal.
Right. And again, I think just like I always say with number go up for Bitcoin, and, people only jump in when someone they know got rich and they bought Bitcoin, a couple of years beforehand, or, whatever the case may be. This is kind of similar too. You almost don't care until someone or someone whose family member ended up being impacted, then you start to take it a little bit more seriously. But you have certain parts of the country who just do not care at the moment, whereas in the West Coast, more the tech center, people are way more concerned than, say, the middle of the country or the East Coast. And, we saw Austin, Texas take a big stand, and they canceled South by Southwest. And that was that was going to be a massive, massive event with people flying in from all over the world. Even the Bitcoin 2020 conference, which I was going to be attending just in like 2 weeks or so, that was pushed back to third quarter of this year. So you have even the the events business is like a $1-something trillion industry that is going to get absolutely destroyed for at least 2 or 3 quarters.
At least,
just with
dude.
At
Dude, we have
least
no clue
2 or
how
3
bad.
quarters.
We have no clue, dude. I love, and I don't mean to cut you off. I love how it always like, when you see schools canceling, like, we're canceling for a week here in like California. I don't know what school it was. It might have been Stanford or something saying that, or I don't know who it was. Anyways, it's like a school district, and it's like, you think this is gonna be over in a week? I'm like, that's all that's going through my head. It's like people think this is gonna be over like next week, and what they don't realize is like this is like a thing that's. I mean, it's probably hopefully temporary. Excuse me, but it could be. We might have to deal with this through Christmas next year. This might, like a lot of isolation, a lot of not going out and doing anything. That's going to drive people insane. And then guess what? People are there's going to have to be people, aka the National Guard, police, etc., that enforces quarantines if that becomes the case. Like people don't think it's going to happen here, but there's a bunch of other countries that are doing it, and it's definitely bound to happen here. I hate to say it, but anyways, South Korea has like a few flights coming out, so it looks like South Korea is basically cut off from most of the world now, at least for the time being.
And you're seeing certain countries again taking it more seriously than others, which, which is good to see. That's the more you want people to start setting a good example.
So, it's very little. Insane. Yeah, who's flying to China right now?
Yeah, that was one of the things Raoul Pal had said to Pomp. He was like, when's the next time you're going to fly? And Pomp, he like took a second. He's like, it's like, I don't know. Of course you don't want to have to fly if you don't want to. I have to fly next week and I really don't want to. But it's like and I'm like early paranoid tinfoil hat kind of guy. And I'm like, yeah, I'd really prefer not to fly right now. But the reality is maybe in a couple more weeks, a lot more people are going to be like, I really don't want to fly. And then you'll start to see it trickle through. But that's just me being overly cautious, which I don't think it can't hurt, right? So this is where it does take more time than you think for it to flow through, for people to start to wake up to maybe I should be a little extra cautious. And then, as we've been talking about for the last year, all the ripple effects of that back into the economy. And it's the perfect excuse for central banks across the world to cut rates and pump liquidity into the markets. Just for, the coronavirus is almost the perfect reason to, pump billions in stimulus. So we talked about helicopter money in Hong Kong. I mean, this is the kind of wacky shit you start to see when the economy starts to stall and slow down. And, I don't know. I don't even know what else to say about it.
If the government gives everyone free money, everyone better lever up. That's all I gotta say. If you aren't levering up, you aren't fun. At that point, if the government's giving us free money, fuck it.
It's too funny,
dude. Yeah, I mean, it's like night. I think it's early morning in Italy right now, like 3:45 a.m. or 4:45, something like that. Maybe 5:45. I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but I'm guessing. But looking at this, there's not many flights there, but there's not many flights in Europe in general. I think Europe's going to come to a standstill. I mean, if you had a vacation right now, again, I had a friend who said he was going to go to, I think you said you're going to Europe in April, and I told him 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I was like, man, that's not happening. It might have been 2 weeks ago. I was like, dude, you don't understand. This is pretty serious. And I think maybe now he understands. I mean, if you look at, you definitely don't like the numbers in Europe right now. 949 France, 799 Germany, 500 Spain, 268 Switzerland, 188 Netherlands, 169 Belgium, 161 Sweden, 147 Norway. I mean, the list goes on. Austria, 79. I mean, it is devastating what's going on there. I mean, that's going to, and they have just open borders. And I think if, again, you're going to see it, we're seeing politicians fail across the board. It doesn't matter what country you talk about. You can talk about America, politics, whether you talk about the Trump administration, whether you talk about CDC, whether you talk about Congress, it doesn't matter. I think it was Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas was one of the only very vocal people about this. And he's been vocal since late January, I think, if not earlier. It might have been mid-January.
Yeah, he was the only person I can recall who was even suggesting to take it more seriously than everyone else was taking it. And I guess he'll be able to say "I told you so" at the end of the day. But I saw something about the issues with the CDC having, or whoever had jurisdiction over being able to test, use the kits and decide which ones works. And this just, again, I think I even just put it on a story or something. It just really goes to show that the increased centralization and regulations and all this stuff doesn't allow the free market to go and just work, right? If you had a bunch of people in any location on the planet who were like, fuck this, I just want to go test myself just to see what's going on, and you physically couldn't, you were not allowed to do that. People could not administer the test. You're not allowing the free market to understand that there's demand for a particular product or service and go figure out how to provide that to the marketplace. And the hindering of that ultimately ends up having really catastrophic implications, because now you're seeing it's taken how long for the U.S. to kind of start testing, and then how many weeks behind are you, and then the testing finally ramps up, and people may have gotten sick already and recovered already, and they're not going to know that they had coronavirus or something.
Gave it to everyone.
Right. So all the numbers get skewed and all this stuff. And I think that, kind of to push it back to that Bitcoin decentralization type of lens, you really want to let that play out. And I don't understand why so many people are against that, especially when this is such a perfect example of, I'd rather go to fucking Quest Labs or LabCorp and be able to get a test right now if I wanted to. And even if it costs $200, what's the difference? But now you need to make 100 phone calls to the CDC and get doctor approvals and all this stuff. I mean, it really is a lot of nonsense.
And they don't think about it. It's well, if you're living with someone or other people or you're exposed to people, it's I need to know. It's important for people to know, because okay, who else do I have to tell? Because you don't know, if that person's in the 20% that's going to get really sick and have to go to the hospital. And
right, exactly.
And it's and that's another issue we face. There's roughly 1 million hospital beds in the U.S. Obviously, there's already quite a few full right now. It's I think it was 65%, so 600,000 to 650,000. And then you think about, okay, It's flu season, so people are sick, pneumonia, etc. It's cold in most of America. and it's going to get really tight really quick. And then you have to think about the containment part. You can't be putting fucking the person with coronavirus in with all the other sick people. They're going to fuck those people up because no one's immune to it. I mean, I hate to put it, but that's as frank as I can put it. And that's the issue. Either we're going to start building a lot of field hospitals and just, outside of these hospitals. I think putting people with coronavirus, unless everyone in that hospital, especially the healthcare workers, that's another issue. We're gonna lose so many healthcare workers so quickly, and people aren't thinking about it. And it's like really frustrating that people like in hospitals aren't taking this seriously. And it's like, again, it's people just thinking this is a meme or no big deal and everything will be fine. And all of a sudden, the U.S. is at 417 cases now. We're going to be, I was saying, I think to you the other day, it's probably going to be 2,000 official cases by next Friday. And that easily couldn't happen at this point. And even then, we're still so far behind this. This could have been here for 6-7 weeks spreading. And that's community transmission. And that's in different areas. It doesn't have to, it's just centralized. It doesn't care. This is the ultimate decentralized enemy.
Yeah, no, it really is. I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of a good way to wrap it up. I mean, we've been talking about this for a couple weeks now. More news is coming out. I'm sure we'll try to touch on it and at least talk about the updates for some of the next episodes as it plays out. And we really have to see what next week brings. It's a brand new week in the markets. It was a nasty week last week. So it'll be interesting to see how the market ultimately responds, especially next week. But I think we say this about every week coming up that it's an important week. So I guess
it's getting more fun now. It's getting more fun.
It really feels like it's important. So
it's so important. I couldn't imagine if we come to Monday and futures are down 5% because numbers have gone way up this weekend. There's no way. You can't look at you just. I mean, I don't mean to extend this much longer, but you can't look at these numbers and things aren't getting better in a sense. It doesn't seem like. And even if you stop in one area, it's still spreading in other areas, and that's the big issue we face. The country list is so long now. I don't know how many countries now, but end of March isn't going to look pretty, and I don't think it's I don't mean to continue this, but did you see that tweet about this continuing into May is when the U.S. gets millions of cases, the exponential parts which gets scary. I'm trying to explain to people when things go exponential, it's not good, and this is one of those things where. You go from 200 to 400 to 1,600 to, it's just something ridiculous. And then you're at 100,000, then you're at and then all of a sudden you're at 1 million. And it's so it's here, there, and everywhere. And I might be front running a little bit because I've been more paranoid, but this is like crypto, where it's just all of a sudden everyone's going to freak out. Everyone's going to want to know what's up with it, except it's a virus. So.
Yep. No, that's a good way to finish it. This was episode 76 of the Beef and Bitcoin podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Leave us a comment. Shoot us a DM if you to let us know what topics you want us to discuss. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We do appreciate that. It helps us pump us up through the rankings. So thanks again. Just be careful out there. Maybe a little extra precautions might not be such a bad idea. And be safe out there.
Peace.
Peace.